Hello, everyone, and welcome to Monday, the 7th of October, 2024's edition of the Presence Posse Presents. I have Danielle McMahon, Bobby Cobb with me, and I'm Miriam Siegel. And today we're going to be talking about presence and community. Presence and community. And who wants to talk about what we mean by community, first of all? Any takers?
I'll take it. I'll do a take. Um, I'm involved with a group that's called the Tribe of I Am, and we tackled this subject a month or two ago. And the hardest part of the whole conversation was defining what we mean by community. Um, there's lots of communities that we are involved with. And like personally, I'm involved in a metaphysical community. I have a lot of friends that are around there. I'm involved in a meditation community. I have friends that we occasionally will get together and meditate. But the people that were in the original conversation around this did not like that as a definition of community because it was too loosely affiliated. And kind of where we ended up going was that many people, and I'll just tee this up and see what you guys think about, when they're thinking of community, they're thinking of it as culture, like the essence of our cultural identification. They saw that more as their um, it seemed to me anyway that that was their definition of community, and they didn't like me referring to those other areas of community. So let me just throw that on the table like a Louisiana shrimp boil and see what you guys make of that initial thought.
What do you think?
I belong to community, and I think they are more based in the way you were talking about a topic or an activity or something like that, not so much a cultural gathering. I also think of community as being the geographic neighborhood area that I live in. Like, this is my community, is Portland, Michigan, right? That works, I suppose, because we are a fairly small community. And maybe in larger urban areas that doesn't work as well. But I tend to think of the communities that I'm involved in as, like the Soul Sisters meetup that I have. And we have that kind of connection. We're not geographically close, necessarily close enough to be an in-person meetup. And I'm really fond of it being a local kind of thing, but it also can be, I'm part of a lot of online communities. This is one, right? So, and it's certainly not based on a particular cultural background, but rather a topic of presence.
Yeah, it seems to me to really have this conversation, we got to get a little clear on the definition. And I think of it as you do, Danielle. I mean, I feel like I am involved with, or at the very least, loosely affiliated with maybe dozens. I've never really taken the inventory to get a count on them, but in those contexts, and when I relate to those people, I very much feel like I am part of that community, and I'm sure people who are staunchly political feel that their political party or their political affiliation is their community. People that are involved in different lifestyles can feel that that is their community where we live. Obviously, that is our community as well. There's so many different ways of really defining it and looking at it.
I was thinking about this, the feeling of being part of something bigger than myself. Like a lot of times a community will have either a common goal or a common value system or ideology or something like that. But then there's like and the idea there is often, like I notice this on Facebook communities as well, where there's this idea of we make each other better. So the whole idea of everybody in that group or that community is lifted in some way and supported in some way. And there's an element of presence in that often, in my experience, depending on what community I'm a part of when it comes to that kind of Facebook group, is where people notice what other people are bringing and show up present for whatever topic is being brought up or whatever person might have a challenge or something like that. And the whole idea of being a part of that kind of community is this idea of greater impact or growth or presence or anything that's sort of like, as I say, a common bond or common value system or common goal. Because a community, like a local community, can be quite different. It can be just, well, we all live in this area and we all have to, like in Norway, they have something called dugnad. Dugnad is when the community gets together and works together to help something. Like we all pitch in and weed the garden or clean the entire apartment block. And there's like 110 apartments here or something. So it's not like a small thing, right? So there's this idea of we are a community, but we don't necessarily support each other in anything. It's just we all understand the responsibility of we all live in the same building. And so we participate in some way to make the building or the life here for the kids or whatever comfortable or better, or that things function well. Nobody steals from each other, or we keep an eye out for each other, but there's not like a big goal other than that. So that's the kind of ideas of community I'm thinking of. There can be religious communities as well, where you can think very differently. Same religion, totally different ideology as well. So, and it doesn't necessarily function seemingly as a community in that sense, but there is a community in the idea that they're all the same religion, for example.
Yeah, two other things that are popping up for me. I was at a festival here this weekend called the Whole Life Festival, and my spiritual community, which is we actually call ourselves the Adam Community, was there, and it was a way for us to raise awareness that we exist. We've been here for 50 years in a relatively small town, and still running across people who have lived here their whole lives and have never heard of us. So, there still is an opportunity to get the word out. And one of the ways that was interesting, a friend of mine that I was working in the booth with started just asking people, what was the vibe that you felt when you walked into this room? And the answers were all across the board. Some people were skeptical, some people were curious, some people were guarded, and some people felt right at home. We had several people, like maybe 1 in 4, 1 in 5 of the people that this gentleman was asking the question of, and then I started to ask it as well. And maybe 1 in 4 and 5 people said the moment that I walked in this place, I felt like I was home again, or that I was home, not necessarily again. But we started to share with these folks that, and the members of our community were all over. A lot of the vendors that were there are members of our community or have spoken to our group. And we started to just say, if you like the vibe when you walk in this room, if you had that vibration that you that it's resonating like home, you should definitely come to one of our events that we have, because I think the vibration will feel very much like that. And I guess we're a community. We don't. It's not really a goal-oriented community, other than everybody that is in it is seeking or exploring or pulling on a thread of curiosity, and doing some sort of self-inquiry, very much like the stuff that we talk about here in the Presence Posse community. And that's interesting to me, because there's not a specific goal that people are really trying to achieve, or at least not a community goal, other than just having a place where you can be yourself and feel welcome and feel open to explore, and to feel like you can ask any question without being ridiculed. And one of the things that is unique about our community, particularly a community that's in a spiritual type space, is we don't have any doctrine, we don't have any dogma, we don't have any set of core beliefs that we are asking people to adopt, or even suggesting that they consider. It's just it's just a welcome and opening place, and that strikes me very different of other communities that I'm involved with, many of which are very goal oriented and looking to accomplish certain milestones and stuff. How does that hit you guys, just in terms of the way that you are thinking about community?
Well, for me, the two communities that I feel most comfortable in are like that, right? Like, we're not there to accomplish anything. We're not there to recruit. We're just there to support one another, right? So the soul sisters meet up, and then it actually is my church, but my church is very different than an ordinary church, because it has that feel to it. Like, you're welcome to be here. We don't care what your path is, what your belief is. We will support you wherever you are on whatever that path is, as long as you're not doing damage to our property or our community in some way. Then we'll have to have some boundaries. But otherwise, we met for a while in a place that was, our church burned a few years ago, and then we met down the street in a place that was called the Business Incubator, and he is trying to support people to open businesses, to support small entrepreneurs. And he had this tagline, I think you would call it, of radical inclusiveness, or maybe it was a value of radical inclusiveness. So he would not rule out anybody at all, right? They could do damage and steal, and he would still try to nourish them and nurture them. And we're not quite that far. So there's always a difference in what feels welcoming and what feels safe to different communities, I think. And as far as the community that I live in, yeah, we do sort of those things. We have community days every summer where people come and have booths and that sort of thing, so that people in the community know other people that are developing crafts or farmers market type things. We do have a farmers market every Saturday all through the summer too. And so there are different feels to them. I generally attend the community day, and I actually participated as a vendor at one point, but it doesn't have the same feel as my smaller communities, right? Like yeah. we're trying to build that network of caring about one another and providing for one another. And I think that's really a great thing to have happen, like before the time when our community got hit with tornadoes, so that people knew one another. They were at least familiar with one another's faces, and so we knew when somebody was coming with their chainsaw that they were coming to help us. Because we recognize them. We've seen them at these various gatherings and things. But even then, I think outside help came in. And, we as a community would like to see them accompanied by somebody we know from the community, right? So the topic being presence and community, what I was thinking of is my presence in those communities is different. Right? I feel comfortable enough to be fully present and fully who I am in those places where I don't have a feeling of perhaps I need to be somewhat guarded. Right? Like that is still a little bit there in the community days when it's a much larger gathering, and there's people that I don't know, and there is an overarching feeling of cooperation, but I think there's still a little bit of petty politics, even within the local community, right? That these are established Portland people and these are new Portland people. And there's a little bit of that. So I feel a little more, I don't know exactly what the word is, but vigilant perhaps in those situations than in the smaller communities.
What was the word? I missed it.
Vigilant?
Ah,
Maybe.
yeah. It's interesting that certain communities, um, there is a certain kind of string of beliefs that you are asked to adhere to, and that when I have become involved in those types of communities, I do notice that if vigilance, the way that I'm kind of processing that is, I've got my guard up, and I'm sort of seeing how and if I can fit into this particular community and learning the behaviors that are expected of me if I'm going to be involved in this community.
And perhaps filtering what you
Yeah.
might otherwise just blurt out if you were comfortable in the community. Like you said, you can ask any question when you're in this one particular community and you're not going to be looked upon as being stupid or silly or outrageous, whatever. Whereas in a different community, you might filter that.
Yeah, and often the communities have little various subgroups within the communities that little factions that get along, and I think being present allows you to kind of see where things are and how things are unfolding, and can really change your relationship to the dynamic that happens to be happening in that. And communities suddenly dissolve oftentimes. That there will be a very strong community that will be thriving for a while, and then suddenly it just kind of fizzles and falls apart, and suddenly, for sometimes no apparent reason, people are merely not being involved in that anymore in any way.
I was part of a community here in Oslo for a few years. This is a few years ago as well. Interestingly enough, that was a presence-based community. So the form of communication was based on presence and authenticity, I guess, to use that word. And what ended up happening was people got injured. There were a lot of psychological challenges, put it that way. because there was an expectation of level of presence that people couldn't maintain. And it was really interesting to be in the community where one person would get triggered and then everybody was triggered, instead of one person gets triggered and everybody else is present and can support that other person. So the idea, again, this sort of value system or ideology, this idea of, well, there are no rules or there are no whatever, and we're based on this, didn't quite work. And so the community ended up falling apart because of that. There was not enough. The presence muscles weren't strong enough to be able to maintain the community. And that has been a really interesting lesson, both as a participant and an observer. I was one of the first people who left because I could see, I was the one who understood this is actually, there's something that's not quite developed here, and there isn't enough of a present foundation to support the participants in the community. And it's an important lesson for, I think, anything to do with presence, really, is the ability to be present enough when someone else isn't able to be present.
Yeah.
So that the community has, I think, Danielle, you were the one who brought up the idea of safety or security. It's knowing, or even Bobby, when you talk about the vibe, like people liking the vibe, it's something about knowing that it's either I know I'm experienced and strong enough to handle whatever storm hits, or I know I'm supported when I'm the storm. And there's at least one person there who can be, I don't know what to call it, the solid tree trunk, the unmovable tree trunk when the winds are blowing. So, and without that, the community can be, if everybody's a storm, it doesn't necessarily feel safe enough for people to be there. So sometimes communities need to go through these kind of processes to find out, are we strong enough as a community, or do we need something? When it comes to being present, like being authentically me, being present in a group, there was another recent experience where I was part of a group. It was a small group, and I spoke, as you are familiar with my generally speaking, and the other members of the group freaked out. And so took my words and really twisted them. You said this, and you have this, and it became like a personal you. And I sat there and I thought, not only did I not say it, but what I did say, I supported with examples so that I clarified what I meant by what I said so that you would understand what I meant. So there was this idea of not being willing to hear or not being able to hear what I was saying, but I didn't ever change what I said. So even this barrage of you, I didn't have to not be me. I didn't have to change anything. It was more just being with their inability to give space to what I was bringing and respect that that's where they were. That's where they are. And then I needed to make a choice about whether to proceed, continue, or not. And that's also very interesting, this idea of, as I understood you, Danielle, like feeling safe enough to be yourself in this particular community or that particular community. Sometimes I'll make a very conscious, I'll do a very conscious reflection about that. And generally it's, but I am me. I don't want to be anybody else other than me. So it is more, where does life lead me so that I can weather whatever shows up, or that there isn't anything to weather in that community, at least not in that great a deal. And I've noticed as time has gone on, things and people just fall away. They just no longer contact me, or it doesn't feel natural for me to contact them. There's just something that isn't, it's just not there. There's no energy. I don't do anything. It's just the being leads me somewhere else and leads them wherever, whatever they're needing, and they're not finding necessarily with me, then they go elsewhere. And it's a beautiful thing because I don't have to do anything. I don't have to be anybody else, and just allow the process to just unfold and happen and trust. And then I don't have to, this idea of setting boundaries and that sort of thing. Garrett Kramer talks about this. I don't always agree with a lot of what Garrett says, but this idea of not setting boundaries, my experience is I don't need to set boundaries because people just stop coming, or I migrate towards something else. So it doesn't feel like that sort of absolute. I have one exception actually, and that is a person who uses me to hurt people. So I choose not to have anything to do with that person. But again, there's no contact there, so I don't have to do anything. It just fell away. And I'm conscious that because of that dynamic, that's not a space I would choose to want to be in. It might happen that I end up in a space with that person, and then I will know what to do when the time comes. It's not something I have to think about. So I think a lot of my journey has been this present, trusting, allowing to unfold, and taking some knocks and getting back up again and knowing, okay, that's it. You just cannot break me. You just can't. There's nothing to break. I am everything. So, yeah, that's my experience anyway. And it doesn't always go the way I might think I want something to go, and then it's letting it go. Okay, well, that's what we were ready for right now as a whole. That is what is right now. And then being with that and seeing what happens with that.
It's interesting that as you're saying that, I was kind of talking about the masks that we sometimes wear and how willing are we able to let go of those and just be ourselves. Boundaries could be looked at the same way, and that really can be almost used as a measure to the degree that we are in touch with our authentic self and comfortable being ourselves. When we're in a certain community and feel like we have to act in a certain way and we have to comply with certain axioms, to the degree that we're uncomfortable with those, that they don't feel natural, that really is a pretty good indicator of how well we fit into that community. And in a weird sort of way, my partner in the booth there was doing exactly that, just kind of intuitively came across that, because he never, when he did ask people, what's your feeling of this group in general, if people kind of roll their eyes and like, there's a lot going on here, and I'm just trying to take it all in and kind of see, that expression of that. And I didn't actually notice, but I'm reflecting back on it now. Those weren't people that either one of us thought, well, you'd probably be a good fit for our community, because if some of this stuff is at all uncomfortable, it's likely the laissez-faire attitude that we take toward a lot of things isn't going to rest so well with you either. So, like in evaluating if we wanted to be a member of a community, if we think of it that way, like if we're looking at joining a community, is the is the idea that if we're entering into this space and thinking, okay, I have to comply with this rule, and this rule, and I don't really like that, but I know that's what is expected here. Can that be a signal, a little uh, intuition whispering to us that, these really are not your people? Whereas, when we feel totally relaxed and feel totally comfortable saying whatever is in our heart or whatever is on our mind, unfiltered, and just feeling that level of comfort, that is to a degree a signal that we are, unless in your case, Miriam, that you said that the saying of that gets everybody's hackles up and gets them very uncomfortable with our presence. And maybe that's an indication that, we're not a good fit for that particular community. I don't know. How does that hit you guys?
I really like the discussion around boundaries because I struggle with that a little bit too. And I remember having a conversation or hearing a conversation about boundaries, and the woman one of the women in the conversation was saying, well, what's another way you can envision a boundary? And she said, like a fence. Okay, so that's a physical representation of that boundary. And what does that fence do? It controls things. Who comes in, who goes out, right? So it's a form of control. So if you believe that control is an illusion, then you don't believe that boundaries are effective, right? So personally, for me, I struggle with that. Like, I know that there are fears in me that want me to defend myself, right? And that's part of my human journey, is that I have been injured or harmed in a way, or have been used to harm someone else in a way that I care not to repeat in this human journey. So there are things that I will probably avoid, situations where I don't feel safe, or I'm able to, um, yeah, just not feel like I belong here, right? That to me is different than setting a boundary and saying that they can't be in existence or they can't be in the world. That I just am not going to participate with that. But the boundaries that a community sets, I feel like are more reasonable. And so then I have that little bit of cognitive dissonance, right? Like, if it's not reasonable for me personally, is it reasonable for an organization? Um, but I think the same is true of the church. Like, we have those boundaries. We don't want people to be hurt within our organization, and we know we can't control that. So all we can do is support people when they experience that, and help walk them through it to the best of our ability and their ability in that moment, in that circumstance. Um, but we have a certain amount of fear because of, for instance, synagogues that have been shot up, right? Or any kind of public gathering place. So after 10 minutes after our service begins, our doors are locked because the doors are behind us, the congregation, right? And we don't want to have that make people feel uncomfortable. So we do that as a safety measure, and it is a boundary. We have locked the doors, and you could knock on the door. Somebody's always sitting within viewing of the door, and we recognize our members and let people in. But it's just an interesting subject for me to be present with. How do you experience safety? Like that is a really new concept to me, that is mine to establish within me. My safety is mine to establish within me, and it's not dependent on anything outside of me. So that's something I'm still kind of juggling. Like, I think I can do this, but I'm not entirely sure. I'm not really, like, it's just a practice. I want to believe that, and I'm going to practice believing that and practice walking it out. But I'm not 100% there. Like most of my life, I have felt like whether I'm safe or not has very little to do with me. Right. So it's a gradual transition for me.
I guess,
sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. I can get a bit, when I start reflecting on the idea of boundaries, for example, and there's a difference, I think. I really liked what you said, Danielle, because there's this difference between a personal boundary, or the idea of personal boundaries, and the idea of community boundary. Like closing the door on the service after 10 minutes because we don't want people coming in when we can't watch the doors, or whatever it is. Or like talking about rules for this particular community. Like, this is a community of, I don't know, some religious belief or some particular practice or whatever, where I think the difference in the feeling will be whether I need to protect it and guard it, or whether it's a kind of a delineation of who meets here. Right? If it's like, well, this group is for people who blah, blah, blah. It's an invitation for those people who want that or are that or whatever, however you want to describe it, and not necessarily a you can't be here. We're locking the doors, we're afraid, we have to protect our community kind of thing. Then there's the idea of, if everyone has presence enough, then the person who comes in the room either won't come because it's just not interesting, or the person will come but will not be met with any kind of energy that would be interesting to warrant them wanting to stay. Like, for a certain point, unless they have to destroy everybody no matter what, it's the wolf having to kill all of the sheep and be happy about that kind of idea. It's like, if I'm attacking people and nobody's answering me back because nobody cares, nobody's engaging with me, I'm bored out of my tree, there's no point in my being here, I leave. That kind of thing. So I would imagine that if enough individuals have enough presence, and that idea of, I don't need to protect myself and my boundaries, or whatever you want to call them, there's a difference when someone comes in, is one of the reflections I can do. Having said that, we are where we are. Our muscles are as strong as they are, and some people's muscles are stronger and some people's muscles aren't. And that's who is in any community at any given time. And that's what presents itself when someone walks into the door, wanted or unwanted or whatever, and how that plays out. So it's because sometimes I think, well, I know I'm the universe, but not everybody else knows. And not everybody else knows that they're the universe. So they may be terrified, and I won't see any reason for me to be terrified, but they will, because they don't see themselves yet. And then respecting those muscles and where they are. And then I need to make choices, as you guys both have said. So I just wanted to bring that in, sort of the idea of boundaries and the difference between individual and group, and how it can still play out. Like, people just fall away, or they don't even come because there's nothing there for them.
Yeah, that is one thing. I've lived in two neighborhoods in my life that had very strong homeowners association with lots and lots of rules, and neither one of those was a good fit for me. Uh, and it's not so much that I was revolting against the rules specifically, but just the idea that there were only 16 colors that I was allowed to paint my house, and I had to match that palette. That was very kind of alienating, pushed me away. That was stuff that I didn't want to be around with. But there is a robust part of that community that quite enjoy going around and looking for violations because they love the coherence, I guess, is for lack of a better word, that they're able to create by having all of those rules. So I've with those two experiences, I now know that I really am not interested in being involved in any neighborhood that's got a super active uh, homeowners association with lots and lots of rules. But on the other hand, I've looked at pieces of property that on the way to them, I might see somebody that's got 14 cars in their front yard, all in various stages of disrepair or being repaired or being rebuilt or whatever. And that is a violation of a boundary that I have because I don't want to see that. And I had one neighborhood that I was looking at, but to get to it, you had to go by two strip joints. And they kind of look like high-end strip joints. I mean, they weren't like totally unsightly, but I just don't want to have to drive by strip joints when I'm going to. And so it gave me the awareness that this is not for me, and I was able to kind of self-select out. And even my group, which I say we don't have any hardcore rules, but even the lack of rules can be viewed as a rule, because the moment that somebody came into our community and wanted to say, hey, here's this doctrine, the new 7 commandments that I've figured out, or the 7 suggestions or whatever, and to the degree that they started preaching that, I believe there would be a bit of pushback from our community saying, not here. So in essence, that is a rule or a boundary. And, the folks that are joining the community are self-selecting that that's what they're looking for. They've tried other things and they didn't like the rules and the regulations, and maybe they're looking for something freer. So and I'm guessing that in some way the boundaries are helpful because that becomes part of the community identity. And I was listening to a conversation. I have several pardon me, several friends that are a member of the LGBT community, and one of my friends is an L in that community, and she doesn't care for the T's in that community because of the men playing in women's sports. And she was a scholarship athlete in college, and she wants to protect the sanctity of women's sports. And I was kind of surprised to hear two of her other friends saying, you're not being a good lesbian. They are a part of our community. The trans community is part of our greater community, and you've got to support that. And she just totally pushed back and said, that's not going to happen. And if I need to adopt that belief to be a member of this community, count me out. I'm not interested. And so there is a group dynamic, obviously, that is happening. And when the group dynamic is aligned and in harmony, it's really, really powerful. And I suspect when it's not, those are the communities that fizzle, that come along for a little bit, may thrive, but kind of burn brightly and burn out pretty quickly as well. So, like, from the point of view of presence, to what degree do you guys feel like our being present and our being in touch with the way that being a member of that community feels inside is a very good way of picking the communities that we should be involved with? That I feel good with these people. I feel like I can be myself. These are my folks. This is my tribe.
I'm going to take a stab at that one because I notice when I'm hearing you talk about like the colors on the houses and that sort of thing and the rules for that, I noticed smiling in myself at the idea of outer coherence when inner coherence is lacking. So it's making everything outside of me seem in control and in order and all of that and pleasant, while possibly being oblivious to what's going on inside of me that is awakening that need for outer coherence. So when I hear you ask about what community, what from the point of presence, in essence, as I am present, there is nowhere, generally speaking, where I don't fit in, to the extent that everything around me is a reflection of an aspect of me and is an aspect of me. And so it's more, if I'm uncomfortable, if something is moving in me when I'm in a certain community or in relation to someone, then I'm curious about what's going on with me, and not from a therapeutic point of view, like when I'm actually working as a coach or therapist, it's like what's going on with you, because my support is for them to be supported in their journey. But in my journey, it is what's going on with me. And if I'm going to a community where I feel safe, for example, well, what in me has the idea that I need to feel safe? Like I need people to behave in a certain way so that I feel safe, rather than I know my power and strength and stand in that and present to that and walk into the room and am that. Does that make sense? Again, it's like projecting whatever I need outside myself. So all y'all have to be in control all the time because then I'll feel safe. Like I'll like you guys and I'll feel safe. That's a projection of something that's going on in me. Instead of reversing it, it's like, I have that. I am that. So I can just walk in there and stand. I can't control what other people do. So the choice is, of course, if this is a group of murderers, I might not want to go in there. But it doesn't mean anything will happen to me if I do. Ideally, I can go anywhere and feel safe because it's not about them. And if there is something about them, it's about me, ideally. But I'm not always that present. I'm not always that in touch with myself. If I were, I don't think I'd be alive anymore. I'd be off into the spirit somewhere. But I am aware of that idea of like outer putting things out, this outer locus of control rather than an inner locus of control, as the formal expressions are.
Yeah.
And my development is more and more inner and more present to myself, and not having to make all this stuff a problem for me.
Yeah, and in the you've kind of presented two extremes, the external locus and the internal locus, but in between there, because there are moments where we are very inside, we're grounded, we we are the embodiment of Zen, and we recognize that everything that we're seeing outside is just a projection of within. And then there's other times when we're totally lost in the illusion and just totally neurotic about the way other people are seeing us, and feeling that we need to constantly be adjusting the persona that we're showing to the world so that we will fit in. And it, from a presence standpoint, it is a very useful exercise to use those feelings as a catalyst for inquiry, to help us get back to that grounded inner focus of energy and attention, and noticing that there is only really what is going on inside of this space we call awareness, however we happen to define that. So using those uncomfortable feelings to say, is this telling me that maybe I've got a need that is currently going unmet? And should I explore what that need is that's not being currently satisfied? Or is this pointing toward an area of my conditioning that's no longer serving me? Am I dealing with a worn out mental model, or have I gotten to the edge of my map of the world with that? So it can be useful as a very powerful catalyst for self-inquiry, to just explore, hey, what's going on with me inside right now, and how can I maybe adjust that? And we've got the ability to do that effortlessly if we are aware enough that it's going on, and that we need a little bit of reorientation, a little bit more grounding, and work on our clarity and our alignment. Does that make sense? I mean, does it, the way that I was seeing the polarity that I felt like you were describing, and exploring kind of the middle ground between those two extremes, or did I muddy the waters?
No, I mean, there's always the gray. So for me, I like being able to examine the polarity, and then know even the pendulum ride. Like sometimes I'm there, and then sometimes I'm there, and then at some point I find, generally speaking, some middle place that's okay. There's no more pull. I think Eckhart would actually say, you guys all know I like Eckhart Tolle, generally speaking, and he would probably say, where there is no personality. So I get getting to the point where the pendulum stops swinging. There's no personality. I have no identity around this. I have nothing invested in this. I just am with whatever is. And there's I'm human. So there's always something to learn. So any feeling, and I'm just thinking about, Danielle, I was blessed to be with you and your family. What is it, a year and a half ago now? And not the same person a year and a half ago than I am now, as I am now. There's been huge changes in my ability to be present to deeper levels, just to put it that way. or my universality. And it's an interesting experience to know, like, the pendulum was swinging more, and using all of those experiences and being blessed with being with Danielle, because we had some amazing conversations and able to put words to those experiences with each other, and that incredible level of trust and closeness, and then that being a part of the journey to let it go and be even more present and not needing that, but allowing those energetic swings, those emotions, the information to be there and to be shared and to be owned and to be let go, not to have to be carried or projected out. It's an amazing discovery. And every time I think like, oh, yay, and there's something new, and I get to look at something else.
Another layer. And I think it's really easy to forget how far we've come, right? So, like, when you guys were talking about various different communities and I'm talking about various different communities, I'm like, so where did I get my start with community? It was in the recovery community, right? And even within our church, not this minister that we have now, but the previous one said, we think that we're all a bunch of holy seekers here, and we're actually a spiritual hospital. So that put a really good paradigm shift on it, right? Like, we still have to be careful of protecting our children. We still have to be mindful of who we are being and where we are and how we are. And so that was an interesting thing. But within the recovery community, yes, we have a goal. We're trying to stay clean one day at a time, right? Or we're trying to stay sober one day at a time, or whatever the ism is that you're dealing with. There's lots of 12-step programs, lots of recovery communities. And within that, there are different emphases. But not only that, whereas there were 12 steps of recovery, then they added 12 concepts of service, I think, and wrote another textbook on that. So if you're going to have a recovering addict be a treasurer for a convention, make sure that they're not going to abscond with the money, right? Like, I mean, this is something that might very likely happen. So you have these certain things. When I was involved in the first convention that we were trying to put on, and somebody said, stood up and said, I'm willing to be treasurer and I'm gainfully employed and I'm this and I'm that and I'm the other thing. I'm like, why did they list off all those things? Well, because we've had the funds for our convention disappear before. So we put these parameters on that position, right? So from that safety of that recovery groups that felt like home to me, and we call those groups our home group, right? Then I can begin to show up authentically and feel safe, and the rules that they have in place for sharing are so that you'll feel safe. Nobody can talk when you're talking. There's no crosstalk allowed. Nobody can give you feedback. You just talk to hear yourself process, right? And that's it. You work with a sponsor, but your whole group does not get to tell you all how they feel about it and all how they think about it, and all, it doesn't become something that you're concerned about saying, because it doesn't matter what they think. You're just talking for yourself anyway. So for me to look back to how the communities that I fit into and that I benefited from and that I look forward to being a part of now, it is that evolution of who I've become and how I can fit in and interact. For sure, my presence it began there, but it has grown.
Would you mind if I brought up something that was inspired by what you just said? And I'm just going to mention that we only have like a minute or two left, and then we're done. And I will ask y'all if you have something to offer. I was just thinking about your talking about the treasurer and making sure that it's a person who's not going to abscond with the funds. And a lot of stories being told of, for example, religious communities where, or religious people where somebody steals something. And so it's like, well, here's more. They don't lock their doors. They continue to allow people to come. And sometimes things get stolen and sometimes things don't. But they don't close the door. Like they don't set that limit of you have to be this and you have to be this and you have to be this. And one of the reflections I've done as far as like this idea of community and leaving the doors open is, where does that come from? And again, from the idea of presence. Is this an ideal, like we have to offer, hi Kat, that kind of acceptance, that kind of community, the idea of we don't limit, we don't set demands and that kind of thing, because that would be an indication of less than godliness, a kind of a twisted idea of what being godly and spiritual is? Or is it coming from a place of presence in a different way? Like you come in and then you steal and then we have a conversation, or you have to live with that, what you've done, and at some point perhaps understand that, oh, you know, this just isn't okay, this isn't working for me. Or maybe you go to jail or something else happens so that you have an opportunity to change that behavior. So I'm not saying one's right and one's wrong, but I do reflect sometimes on that, where it's coming from, that kind of, do we need to set these sort of rules and limits because we've had that experience, or do we have a misguided idea of what being a good person is, or a godly person is, or something like that? Or is it something else? So I just thought I'd bring that, because we're talking about presence in community, and I thought you brought it up, and your experience. And again, learning from the experience, oh, people steal that money sometimes. Okay, what do we want to do about that? And then agreeing on what that is. And yeah, it was beautiful. So that's why I wanted to mention, hi, Chelsea. It's a whole different kind of community we didn't get into.
Well, so, there's that. We could do presence in family.
We can absolutely do that. But now we don't have time anymore. So I would like to ask both of you whether you have anything that you would like our viewers to know about. Thanks, Rosalie.
Thanks, Rosalie. I'll give a brief overview. I have got quite a few things that I've been working on that are going to be sort of electronic downloadable versions of little lessons and cool things that people can consider. I've spent most of last week, and I have budgeted most of this week to master some technology to help me make that more widely and easily available. And this is a real exploration of presence, because technology and I are not traveling on the same vibration. So it is a constant effort for me to stay present, stay grounded, and to remind myself I'm learning a whole new language. And it's okay if I don't get it day one. So I hope in the not too distant future to be having lots of offers and lots of resources that are available. I have a group on Facebook called Our Mindful Life, and that's generally the first place that I release this type of stuff to that community. So if you're interested in the stuff that we've talked about here today and particularly the idea of exploration, because a lot of it is around getting that understanding that you mentioned briefly there, Miriam, that, you know, how we are, our level of grounding very often determines how we will react. And the same group can have, or the same person can have the idea, oh, if they're taking my money, they must need it a lot more than I do. And that's fine. I feel abundant. And that same person may still get a lockbox for the next event, so that it's not so easy to take. And that's all personal exploration. That's peeling back the layers of our own intimacy onion. And most of the stuff that I'm going to be releasing revolves around that. So if you're interested, Our Mindful Life on Facebook will get you early notification.
Beautiful.
How about you, Danielle?
Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby. We'll look forward to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to have to take that journey with technology as well. I have a couple of offerings that I have managed to work out and can do. And I have a half-day in-person gathering coming up, a workshop with Angela K. Simon, and that's called Rediscovering the Peace in the Ancient Wisdom of Seasonal Living, something like that. So it's going to be fun here on the farm. Yeah, so that's October 20th, and that's on my page. So find me on Facebook and message me if you're interested in any of these offerings. Thank you.
Excellent.
And how about you, Miss Miriam?
I want to do the horses. I want to come and do the horses. Yeah, thanks, Bobby. I'm actually offering a free group healing on procrastination on the 15th of October. And I've gotten feedback from people, enough feedback that it looks like I'm going to be offering it at 2 different times. So I'll do it twice on the 15th of October, which will be 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening, and my time. And as long as there are 5 people, at least 5 people, I will have both of them. So I'll put the links in the Presence Posse group, and I'll have also in my own group that's called Rapid Rise, and on my profile, so that you can, or I won't put the links, I'll put the information, and if you want to participate, you can let me know and I'll send you the link to register. So that's on the 15th of October, group healing on procrastination or self-sabotage, even imposter syndrome, depending on how you use it. So, and I will be doing group healings here and there, and I'll let people know when they are and what the topic will be. Because when doing a group healing, the way that I'm planning to do it, it's good to have a common topic. And also, I will be offering soon, going back to my trainings. I used to offer these trainings, I think it was every other week. I will probably be doing once a month, a training in conscious, courageous conversations. Conscious, courageous conversations is a way of being present while conversing. And a lot of people think they're present, they think they're being mindful, and then they get a shock. So I'll be doing these trainings to help people notice and learn to communicate from more presence. I'll be doing those about once a month in my group, Rapid Rise. And now I have a couple of spaces available for one-to-one coaching. So if you'd like to check that out, you can have a free demo with me. If you've already some experience with me, just let me know and I'll send you the link. And that's me. So next week we will meet again, 14th of October, with a new presence topic. And I have no idea what that is, but we will let you know.
It's yet to be revealed.
Yet to be revealed. So be present in our groups and you'll know what the next topic is. Thank you to everyone who participated today. It is, I'm assuming I'll speak for the others, a pleasure to be with you. And of course, for me, a pleasure to be with both of you, Bobby and Danielle. and look forward to meeting again. Everybody have a great week, or have the week you have.
Ciao for now.